Hey, good afternoon, everyone. This is Stuart Brodsky, Professor of Sustainability in Real Estate Development at the Shack Institute of Real Estate at NYU. And I'm pleased to have this panel discussion today, which is a follow-on to an event we had in late June, where I had assembled a group of experts, experienced professionals in the real estate industry, talking about sustainability, COVID-19, response to COVID-19, and how it's impacting efforts to pursue their ongoing efforts in sustainability. So I'm pleased to have Dana Robbins Schneider from Empire State Realty Trust today, Lisa Bolle from CodeGreen, a consulting firm, and we are expecting one other speaker, but we got a last minute call that he had a distraction, a serious distraction, and is running late. So we'll see if we get joined. I do want to share my screen for a moment and give some context to today's call. I'm doing that now. So we had an event on a session on June 25th. Chris Caton from CodeGreen Solutions, Dana Robbins Schneider from Empire State Realty Trust, and Eric Duchon from LaSalle Investment Partners joined me in a discussion about what we were facing, what they were facing as they were responding to COVID-19. As it turned out, well, we knew that that session was being recorded. It's now actually available on YouTube. So you can do a search on YouTube with my name or Shack. There are actually a lot of YouTube or a lot of Shack events that are now posted on YouTube across a wide range of different topics, from finance to sustainability to property operations and management and construction management. So if you want to know a lot about what's going on at Shack and the programs that we're running, you can look at our website or you can go to YouTube. This event is the second event in a series that I'm having on the discussion of the topic of COVID-19, and we'll be having another event on November 18th, where I've invited Josh Radoff, who is a consultant at WSP Consulting, and recently published an article, which is a review of healthy building rating systems that was published in Building Green publication. I'm having him talk about his findings, and we'll have another guest speaker also talk about what they're seeing in the marketplace. But today, we want to review some of the takeaways from the call that we previously had and provide that as context for our discussion today with Dana and Lisa and Eric. So one of the things that was evident and that was expressed clearly was that even before COVID-19, the issue of wellness was increasingly part of green certification programs, and there were an increasing number of independent freestanding green wellness certification programs. So the teams that were directing sustainability that adopted leadership position in responding to COVID-19 were not far into the practice and far into some of the requirements. Another point that came out of the conversation, because I asked about the validity and the usefulness of these certification programs, is that they are an important tool for communicating to tenants as well as investors about what they're doing. Certification programs can provide a third-party perspective, third-party rigor, and platform upon which individual companies can launch their own wellness programs. So they're a good foundation and a good talking point to support conversations when you're talking to your stakeholders. But there was also a caveat that building owners need to be careful to not overstate the outcomes of the wellness programs. That they are important, that they are valid, but they don't imply. You don't want to imply that they mean more than you are comfortable with. As I said, companies were pursuing wellness programs in advance of COVID-19, so they were prepared. if for no other reason than the sustainability teams that were taking on the responsibility of managing the response to COVID were already highly multidisciplinary projects with task forces that ranged across an organization and that tapped into and required goals and objectives be met by lots of different stakeholders across lots of different what otherwise might be called silos within an organization. There was an expression that there was little or no diminution in effort and interest in the core issues of sustainability. Our speakers have long-term ongoing programs to address issues of sustainability. They've been leaders in forging a path that others have followed, and their feeling is that there is no distraction, perhaps because of the integration that was already occurring, but also perhaps because stakeholders such as investors who are asking about sustainability, it's important to them, and that importance isn't going away. And the other takeaway that I wanted to mention on this page was something that Dana Schneider particularly emphasized, which was the leadership that the real estate industry at large, such as the real estate industry associations, and she pointed to the Sustainable Policy Advisory Council of the Real Estate Roundtable, but I think that there are others, how much the real estate industry associations have stepped up to the forefront, helped their members who are from across the stakeholder supply chain in the industry engage in long term in the face of COVID-19. In terms of portfolio, comments on portfolio, what we were seeing, was that in many cases, while buildings are still fully leased, the actual tenant occupancy hours are down significantly. And one of the numbers that I heard was up to 90%. There were 90% less people in the building than on a typical workday. That energy consumption was down between 20 and 30%, depending upon the property type. That there was significant increase in cleaning, not a particular surprise, but along with the interest in cleaning, there's a requirement or an expectation that we be careful about what we're cleaning with. That we're making sure that our cleaning materials, while they are antibacterials and antivirals, that they don't have any residue toxicity that contributes to a diminution in indoor air quality in our buildings. In our multifamily properties, we heard from our speakers that energy consumption was up, not a particular surprise since people aren't spending time in their office and now spending more time at home. And that this is taking place despite the fact that there's a closure of amenity spaces within multifamily properties, and that there's obviously also an increased cleaning of common areas that comes at an expense and level of effort and communications on top of that. One of the unexpected silver linings from this situation is an observation that with our buildings 90% unoccupied, tenant-wise, but consuming 20 to 30%, only 20 to 30% less of the energy than you would on a normal day, is growing insight and understanding and an opportunity to study what are the energy consumption drivers in a building and how might lessons be learned that inform benchmarking programs such as Energy Star and others that are in the marketplace. So today's panel is looking at where they've been, what lessons they've learned in the intervening months since June. And I'm asking the panels to think through what are the long-term and ongoing effects of the pandemic in terms of managing their work, and also continuing to ask, are we still on track, on course to address the climate crisis that so many companies have been very good at addressing through their previously existing sustainability strategies. So we have Lisa Bolle from CodeGreen Solutions, Eric Duchon from LaSalle Investment Partners will be joining us, and Dana Schneider from Empire State Realty Trust. Here are their pictures in case you are not able to get the visual today. And here's some of the issues that I think can kick off our conversation. Perhaps the panelists can talk about major developments and events and changes in their practice that they have shepherded through. If they've pursued wellness certification, how is the wellness certification supporting your relationships with your tenants and investors. As I said, the prior webinar noted that certification is a tool, but execution and not over-promising in terms of what it provides are important caveats. Question whether or not, and grow an understanding from our speakers, how this is affecting occupancy and tenancy in our properties. Perhaps we can talk about the impact on the industry's efforts to respond to the climate crisis. Are we still seeing that we are able to execute our robust practices towards sustainability? Are programs that require benchmarking and energy performance disclosure, are they still on track? Are they off course? Are they distracted? What about our efforts to pursue renewables? What about our efforts to do carbon accounting in our buildings? And anything new coming out of the industry associations, such as the Real Estate Roundtable, and comments or predictions for the next months. So I'd like to thank everyone for joining us, and I'd like to open up the conversation, perhaps starting, Dana, if you could tell us about what you've been shepherding at Empire State Realty Trust, what's new, and how is what you've been pursuing that is new been meaningful in terms of supporting your relationships with your tenants and your investors?
Okay. Can you boil it down so I can focus?
Sure.
Sorry,
so
that's like a lot of things in one.
Yeah. Okay. So have you moved forward with any of the wellness certification programs? I think I heard that you had. I'm not just making that up.
Yeah.
And why and how is that ending up being meaningful?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Stuart.
Sure.
So
Sorry.
That's a great question. That's a good question. I was like, all right. So we actually, Empire State Realty Trust is the first, represents the first buildings and the first portfolio in the United States to achieve, to be awarded the International Well Building Institute's Well Health Safety rating. We're really proud of that distinction, and we're really proud of the leadership role, which put us in a position to earn that distinction. If those on the call are not familiar with WELL or the WELL Health Safety System, I can give a quick background. WELL is the program developed by the International Well Buildings Institute. It's a comprehensive program for data-driven, science-based, third-party verification of a holistic wellness program of all types of existing and new spaces, measuring the impact, positive or negative, of buildings on the humans who spend 90% or more of our time indoors. So the theory is that these spaces where we spend so much of our time should be healthy for us, should make us healthier and not the opposite. Obviously, given the nature of COVID-19 and the pandemic that began in March, it's been extremely important for us as building owners to respond proactively, and Empire State Realty Trust has done so. So I'll get into the measures that we implemented if we want to do that. But what we also thought was important, in addition to developing leading measures to ensure that our buildings were safe and healthy, was also to pursue this rating, to communicate with our employees, visitors, occupants, tenants, visitors to the observatory, which has been open since July, to communicate that, everything that we've done to invest in their health and safety. The WELL Health Safety Rating prioritizes health and safety overall, but the WELL system has always done so, specifically in a post-COVID-19 world, and beyond, with the third-party verified rating system. The WELL Health Safety Rating is focused on facility operations and management. It's not just design. It's evidence-based. Like I said, it's science-driven. It's a third-party verification. It works for all facility types, and it's heavily based on operational policies, maintenance protocols, emergency plans, stakeholder education, HR policies. It's just a really comprehensive view and it required quite a lot of documentation on our side. But you know, we've pioneered and showcased so many sustainability innovations throughout our portfolio for years, and it positioned us really well. We actually went for all possible features and credits in the well safety program, and it went from you know, cleaning to engineering measures to HR policies, and so you know, we think it's really important to, you know, take a system that's informed by the foremost industry leaders, and just to prove that we've done everything we possibly can to make our spaces as healthy and safe as they can be, that we meet and exceed the most stringent features of healthy buildings.
That's great. So you know, on the last call, you had already discussed a lot of measures that you were taking. What are some of the measures to achieve wellness certification, the WELL certification, that, if any, that you hadn't already thought about, and how, in other words, how was the wellness program, the WELL program, particularly helpful?
So that's a good question. We actually had implemented so many of them already, that we were really well positioned. You know, we didn't do a lot that we hadn't already done, because I had actually been working with IWBI already on the development of the program. But for those who had not started immediately with the development of a comprehensive program in mid-March, you know, the measures are pretty extensive. You know, on the air and water side, there are measures. You know, I can go through what we did at a high level, because it'll give everybody an idea of what the system is looking for. You know, cleaning and sanitization we were doing, but if anyone's familiar with WELL, they required extensive reporting on every single chemical used, when it's used, how often it's used, making sure that it's certified. So I did actually have to report in a little bit more detail, you know, than I was already requiring our cleaners to do. But all of our cleaning materials, disinfections, were already compliant. But on emergency preparedness, there were some things that we did have to have a look at, you know, because they're looking again at a more intensive program around health and wellness than none of what they're asking for is typical. They were looking around health service resources, which is very much HR focused. So if you're going to do this, it's not enough to just have policies, procedures, mechanical expertise and operations in your buildings. You also have to reflect in your HR policies, benefits, sick days, mental health programs, support systems to help people in climate-based emergencies, systems in place to help people in the face of pandemics. You know, really intensive on the HR side of supporting your employees through climate-driven change or pandemic-driven changes. Stakeholder engagement and communication was huge. We had held town halls with our tenants and all kinds of communications with our employees, memos, weekly HR blasts, events, like fun events like virtual happy hours and virtual meditation, virtual stretching, virtual workouts, ways to still see each other during the lockdown, and engagement with the tenants directly about what we were doing and what they needed, what their questions were, what kind of health and safety measures we were putting in place for them. And the air and water quality management was the final area where we had done so much. But I guess to answer your question, you know, there's 5 main categories, and like we were so heavily focused on the air and water quality, especially air quality, knowing that this was aerosol driven. So on that, again, like way beyond what you would ever normally do. It wasn't just that we had MERV 13 filters everywhere. I had to report to them every single unit the date on which we had changed them, what our program for changing them going forward would be. You know, every single unit verifying the increased ventilation.
Okay.
I provided air and water quality tests for every single building, stuff like that. It's a
So,
lot.
and I can't imagine that this isn't convincing and meaningful to the tenants. Are they left stunned and impressed by everything that you've done, or are they asking for more?
So we're working on tenant outreach. I'd love feedback from the people in the audience. The best way to do that, to communicate the value of this to tenants who don't necessarily know about rating systems, and just say, you know, we've complied with the most rigorous system there is to make your space as healthy and safe as it can possibly be.
Right.
As a landlord, it's actually difficult to get in touch with every individual who occupies your building.
Yes. Yes. And in comparison, Dana, to your firm, which owns, as we said in the last session, over 10 million, I believe you said over 10 million or approximately 10 million square feet of space, most of it office, most of it in New York, and all of which you manage and operate yourself. Eric is an investment company and has intermediaries between what LaSalle investment partner wants or aspires to and what actually gets executed at the property. So Eric, with that in mind, how has your experience been different in launching wellness initiatives and other measures to address inquiry and concern over COVID-19?
Sure, it's a great question, Stuart. And just to take a step back, LaSalle Investment Management, a global investment manager, 65 billion or so in assets under management globally. About 20 or so billion of that is in the Americas, and a very diversified set of properties. So we have across the US in the majority of major markets, office buildings, multifamily rental buildings. We have industrial buildings, typically distribution warehouses. We have open air shopping centers, typically grocery anchored. We have self-storage units. We have truck terminals. You know, we're very, very diversified. And we rely on third-party property managers, companies like CBRE, Cushman & Wakefield, JLL, quite obviously, to Hines, Unico, kind of you name it. We work with the majority of property management firms out there to really run the day-to-day operations of our buildings. So when COVID hit, they were our first line of defense, and we really relied on their property management firm guidance to update, you know, practices at the assets. As we quickly got more sophisticated on it, to Dana's point, we were providing our expectations that HVAC systems would move to 100% outdoor air as much as technically possible, that we were putting in MERV 13 filters everywhere technically possible, that, you know, cleaning practices were increasing and being enhanced, that personal protective equipment requirements were being put into place with signage all over the place, you know, common areas were being closed, and working with tenants across the board. Because we rely on those third-party property managers for operational control and you know, day-to-day efforts, we did not develop any portfolio-wide policies on this, but we've also recognized that that is an area that LaSalle really should take a position, and that's why, you know, similar to Dana working with the Well Health Safety Rating, LaSalle was already a FitWell champion, working on FitWell certifications in our multifamily portfolio. We are on their advisory council and started hearing from them about the viral response module they were developing, which really fits well with the way LaSalle does business with these third-party property managers, as I'm mentioning. So that certification, I think the health safety rating and FitWell fire response module were released like within a week or two of each other. You know, both were kind of working on it. it is at both an entity level and asset level. So what LaSalle is currently doing is determining how we can apply this to our office and medical office portfolio as one entity, and our multifamily portfolio as a separate entity, given there are nuances in the way those assets operate. The main one being right now that our multifamily buildings are extremely heavily occupied, given that folks spent all of their time there during quarantine, and that our office assets are very low level occupancies, still in the 15 to 30% occupied range across the board on average. So we just want to make sure that we're developing the policies in accordance with FitWell guidance and their policies and procedures. A lot of the same areas that Dana was talking about that are on the health safety rating for well, enhancing indoor air quality, enhancing IAQ policies, driving down IAQ testing and best practices, enhancing cleaning and maintenance practices. One of the funky ones that's in the FitWell VRM is that everything has to be, well, this isn't the funky part, everything has to be EPA NLIS certified, but they have a carve out for, I can never say, like water or ammonium or something like that. So you have to make sure that that's not actually being used. And these are the kind of things that, we need to say, this is LaSalle's stance on, from the 20,000 foot level, and then how assets and property managers are you actually implementing it? Because there's a push and pull there. We don't want to go out and say this is LaSalle's stance when it actually can't be implemented on the ground. So currently we're surveying all of our office, medical office, and multifamily assets to determine how they currently align with the FitWell Virus Response Module, what cost implications would be, how much effort there's going to be to go into this, with the future intent to pursue the certification and use that as really a communication tool for our tenants and residents in these buildings, that we are, as a firm and as property managers, doing everything that we can, practices based in science, to reduce the transmission of COVID-19 in these buildings and provide them with a comfortable and secure environment. And then also it's a great way to demonstrate to our investors that we understand how important this is and are doing something across their portfolios.
Okay, interesting. So one of the things that I'd like to ask you about is your occupancy. You said it's around 15 to 20%. Is that increasing over what it was, and is it continuing to increase? Or what are your predictions? I'm understanding, Dana, if you have perspective on that as well.
For us, I mean, as I said, our multifamily, we're very highly occupied, and the good news there is people are not, they're renewing their leases at very high rates because they just don't want to deal with them. I think we're slowly starting to see things tick up. There are still some tenants that say they're not coming back until January, and they're going to reevaluate that in December. So I don't think we'll see a big uptick, but we're ready for it if we do, and we're continuing to work with tenants on whatever their time frame may be.
I see. Okay. Dana, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I think it's similar. We don't have multifamily technically in our portfolio, but yeah, we're seeing numbers slowly but surely increase.
Okay. Okay, Lisa.
I was just going to add, from a consultant's perspective, we've seen in the suburbs that there's a higher occupancy for commercial office buildings than we're seeing in some of the cities. And one of the reasons we're seeing for that is not because of the building's ability to clear itself of the COVID virus, but of the transportation to that building. And in the suburbs, you have a larger amount of people who are single-use vehicles driving themselves to the building, where you can, in a way, like mini quarantine yourself to and from your house to the building. In a city like New York, you have to a lot of people are taking public transportation, which isn't as sophisticated as, LaSalle and ESRT are being about their cleaning protocols and safety protocols. And so actually it's the getting to the building that's reducing occupancy we've been seeing.
Yeah, I think I'd heard that elsewhere, that the suburbs are, because of the occupancy characteristics in terms of getting to the building, are private, that there is more occupancy. And are you seeing more use of the wellness programs in the suburbs as well? Or is this not appearing to be a concern or meaningful as a mechanism?
We've been seeing that that real estate companies are taking a portfolio approach as opposed to an asset by asset approach. So when looking at dealing with COVID, they're looking across all of the buildings that they own, not in specific assets. When we talk about going for a LEED certification, usually it's a a certain starred asset that is a large building with most of the gross asset value of the portfolio. Those are the places that people focus on for LEED. When it comes to health and safety, we've been seeing more of a portfolio approach. So in that sense, an equal adoption throughout the suburbs as well as in the cities.
Okay. All right. Dana, there was a question that came up. I'm wondering if it hasn't been addressed by something that Eric already discussed in terms of filters, but there's a question that came up while you were speaking, asking if you could speak to specific measures that were taken for the air and water quality pillars. Can you speak more specifically about water, air, and any of the particular components that you've looked at? Now, as I said, I think Eric already mentioned MERV 13 filters and a couple of other things. I don't know if there's anything else that you think a listener on this call would find valuable that you've done. I know you've done so much.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. I saw that come in, so glad to have a chance to talk about it. I'm sure that Eric and I work together a lot, so I'm sure that our responses are relatively similar. For indoor environmental quality, we thoroughly cleaned all of the equipment, which is actually a really big deal and should be part of normal maintenance. But we basically disinfected and cleaned everything so that we were starting from a perfect condition baseline. We did the same with new MERV 13 filters. We actually have MERV 13 filters in 100% of ESRT units now. And I track that unit by unit regularly. We increased our outside air intake for additional ventilation across all buildings consistently, minimum 20 to 30% outside air. And of course, at this time of year, we can use, during what we call the shoulder season, even more outside air in economizer cycle. We use bipolar ionization, a technology called Atmosphere, in many of our spaces. It's in 7 of our buildings in select areas, and it's something that every one of our units, our air handling units, is prepped to provide to tenants as well. And Atmosphere in laboratory testing was shown this summer to be 99.92% effective at neutralizing coronavirus, in addition to being a general indoor environmental quality improvement measure. Plus, we have the air testing across all pollutants and continuous monitoring. We also have standards already for low and no VOCs in any of the work, construction or maintenance that occurs. So that's also important. On the water side, in a low occupancy, we made sure to operate toilets, urinals, sinks daily. It's really important to keep the water moving. And we flushed, cleaned, disinfected, tested all the HVAC, which we call process water, and the domestic water systems for Legionella, for pH, for temperature. So those are some of the measures we've put in place.
Do you think that even if, let's say, we had a vaccine in a very near term and we had a few months of the population ramping up and getting vaccinated, do you think we'll ever return to the practices or lack of practices that were common prior to COVID in terms of cleaning our buildings, or is this the new normal?
I think that's a great question, and I'll take it first, and then I'm sure Eric can add to it. I think Eric and I both probably had a lot of these measures, or perhaps less intensive versions of these measures already lined up. So we already had MERV 13 as a standard. We already had ASHRAE 62.1 compliant ventilation as a standard. We already had bipolar ionization atmosphere as a standard. We already don't allow VOCs. We already don't allow red list materials. We already had a green cleaning program. I think we intensified it with COVID just to make, frankly, on the tracking side, to be like, not one single unit can be allowed to fly through. I will track them all. To go through, you know, with the logs that our cleaners keep and make sure like nobody was sneaking in any nonsense. We did a really thorough review of disinfectants. Actually, we did change the disinfectants, obviously, because before we weren't looking for specific, you know, coronavirus tested, confirmed disinfectants. So we went by the EPA CDC N list and identified what we use as Oxivir, which is a hydrogen peroxide based, super effective, proven disinfectant that is also healthy for people. So we were already doing those things. I don't think we'll go back. So one thing I'm hoping to go back on when we're not in a pandemic is this excessive ventilation, which is super inefficient.
Okay.
I'm not sure it even works, but whatever.
You're not even sure it works.
Yeah, I'll agree with Dana there.
I mean,
It's exactly what I was going to say is, you know, there's higher humidity levels that you need to maintain as part of these safety, health safety rating and fit well viral response module that, you know, force, as we've since learned and has been confirmed since our last call together, is that it's an aerosol virus, right? So it's the main way that it's communicated is between people, and if you have humidity, it forces the droplets to drop to the ground, which is, you know, why these cleaning standards are very important. But there's also, you know, studies that show that it doesn't last so long on surfaces. So, you know, it kind of is about when those cleaning practices are happening. I think agreeing with Dana, you know, the ventilation will hopefully be able to get back to more normal type of ventilation so that we can stop that drag on energy. You know, we have a building in Tempe, Arizona. I may have just mentioned this last time, but in order to increase the relative humidity to even 40% there, I mean, it's a major energy consumer because it's very dry, right? So that's that building, even though it is, you know, 30% occupied on a good day, it is consuming, you know, 15% more energy every day, right, than it was previously, and that's specifically due to that increase in humidity that we are implementing there. I also think, you know, the cleaning practices, while they're great, you know, it's a lot, right, and to have additional, you know, janitorial folks going around literally like on a loop in your lobby, which is what we have in some places, right? Like they start in one corner and they make their way around, and then by the time they're done, you know, it's an hour later and they have to make their way around again. It's just a lot, and I don't think in normal circumstances that is required. I am glad that we're using even, you know, greener to say, but even better IAQ products than we may have been before. As Dana said, more intensive focus on what these products are. But, you know, I just don't think the frequency of cleaning will be as necessary once we get back into a whatever new normal environment is going forward.
Right.
And I won't speculate on what the timing of all that is.
All right. All right.
yeah, I would agree. I mean, I hope that we don't have to do the, you know, the electrostatic spray disinfectant. You know, I hope that goes away.
It's just weird to see.
In a non-pandemic environment, you wouldn't want to do that because it's actually, you know, there are, in a I just want to be very clear, these words are mine and not the company's. And also, like, when it's not a pandemic, the rules should be different. Normally, it's not healthy to antimicrobial everything, right? Humans should be exposed. It's better for our immune systems if it's not a deadly virus to be exposed to non-deadly, life-threatening viruses, bacteria, mold, mildew. That's part of our environment. It should be. You know, those of us who have babies know, like, it's actually worse for their immune systems to not be exposed to normal, non-deadly. So I would hope that when there's an effective vaccine and when things are safe, we can back away from excessive outside air introduction and also excessive disinfecting use.
Okay.
Use it in the bathrooms where we need it.
Okay. Lisa, what were you going to say?
Well, I just want to say, let's not pretend here either that this is the last time we're going to encounter a pandemic. We have large masses of people moving into cities away from rural and suburban areas. We have increases in temperature. We have, lots of things that are spurring, even climate change related, that are spurring new diseases that are popping up. We have permafrost melting that's going to, show us a whole bunch of diseases we haven't seen in many, many years that have been, kept in the ice. What I hope we do is not go back to normal, but find somewhere in the middle. Like Dana said, it's a problem to over sanitize. Then you encourage the superbugs to grow and things like MRSA. It's going to have to be somewhere in the middle. But hopefully one of the silver linings of this is that it's opened our eyes to global health issues are a risk. They're a risk in every organization, and it's something we need to keep our finger on the pulse.
Right. It's been said that we've or some members of the scientific community have said for a while that it was only a matter of time before we encountered a pandemic. And it's also been said many times that over sanitizing our environment is not a good idea. And evidence of that is the fact that our own bodies survive on or thrive on the germs that we have inside as well. So what is this in terms of your leading and rigorous efforts to focus on sustainability, green buildings, and climate crisis? Have you found over the past couple of months that that your stakeholders have less of an ear for the communication and the accomplishments that you've been pursuing in that arena? Or is this still robust, and as we get more and more used to doing the sanitation and the MERV filters, are you seeing a return to your efforts to do things that that you perhaps put on hold, if you did?
So I'll take this one first. I mean, I think on our last call I said there was a bit of a pause and focus on climate change issues when COVID hit, and I think that was rightfully so. We had to focus on the pandemic. Since our last call has been hot and heavy, and just kind of nonstop back focus on climate change. And certainly California wildfires, successive storms in the southeast that we had coming through have refocused everyone on physical risks due to the changing climate. And we're at LaSalle working on a climate risk and resilience initiative globally quite broadly.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the net zero carbon front, I think the pandemic really focused that a pause in the global economy really did wonders for carbon emissions for the world, right? With a massive year-over-year reduction. I think everyone on this call has likely seen the maps of NO2 in China and how that kind of yellow mass over their manufacturing industrial presences in those cities that really went away and has now come back while they're getting back to business. So we're certainly aware of that, and as Lisa mentioned, folks going back to commuting, doing it in cars is going to have an implication as well. But we're continuing at LaSalle to focus on net zero carbon and a commitment to achieve it globally by 2050. As a matter of fact, just yesterday, the Urban Land Institute Greenprint Center released its net zero carbon for operations by 2050 goal, and LaSalle is a signatory to that globally. So we're really proud of that effort. It enhances a commitment that we made in Europe under the UK Better Buildings Partnership Climate Change Commitment to form an umbrella for our Americas and Asia's regions, and are working on developing the global carbon strategy towards net zero for all of the direct assets under management. So it's an exciting time in this space. I think folks are really figuring out how to approach both the physical risk side and the transition risk and net zero carbon side of things right now. And we're having great success in doing so and sharpening our pencils and achieving energy efficiency. And using this time where buildings, now that kind of the cost cutting or cost or expense holds have been lifted, where we know that we still have cash flow, implementing LED retrofits, implementing HVAC retrofits, and getting those going to really spur energy efficiency projects. And as we look to 2021, I think there's some assets where we're hurting, of course, but for the most part, it's a pretty normal environment, and we're budgeting capital expense, we're budgeting operating expense to achieve energy efficient outcomes.
Okay, interesting. Great. What you said this was some work was being done through the Urban Land Institute, and Dana on the last call mentioned the Real Estate Roundtable. Any other shout outs to any industry associations that are significant supporters of the industry that you would advise our audience on the call to tap into today?
I don't want to leave anybody out and send them. The Real Estate Roundtable did a great job convening all the major owners starting in March, and the total lack of federal guidance that was science-based or helpful at all. It was really helpful to have access not only to our in-house expertise, but to our peers. And so the Real Estate Roundtable did an amazing job of that. I feel like the rest of them are a little reactive, to be honest, which is fine. But what ULI published now and what the USGBC is developing now, what Fitwell and Well came up with, are all super helpful. I really would use the Well and Fitwell guidelines. For Well, it's the health safety rating. For Fitwell, it's the viral response. And they're similar, though not the same. Eric and I both use both rating systems in our portfolios. I chose to use the Well rating system because it was released first and I wanted to do this immediately. I also think that Well is known for being super intense. Everybody knows that. And I didn't want to mess around when it came to the Well health safety rating that we were going to use. But, we both use them both. So, it's not preferring one or the other. If you're looking for a blueprint to use for your response in your buildings, I would use those. If that's, I think Eric would probably agree. And the New York State guidelines are amazing. Yeah, they're the best.
You said that last time too, that the New York State guidelines were amazing. I think it's great to hear.
Well, they kind of do that whole, we believe in science and we evolve as we learn. Cuomo, I think, did a great job with it. So, but I would still use, the Well health safety as a guideline because it lays out the super duper best practices in detail, and it gives format in which to track these things if you're going to. So I think that's really
right.
It's not enough to just do them. These are things you have to continue over time and verify are in place. So.
Okay. Anything to add to that, Eric? I know you're on a lot of councils and committees.
As you said, from a climate and net zero carbon perspective, I would definitely go look up ULI's net zero carbon commitment. I want to see a really stringent one. Go over and look at the UK Better Buildings Partnership climate change commitment. I'll reiterate what Dana said on RER's sustainability policy, Real Estate Roundtable's Sustainability Policy Advisory Council, that they've really done a great job of leading the initiative on COVID, but I think just also focusing on issues around energy efficiency and climate change still. As folks may know, RER was instrumental in a section of the Duchon bill that set EPA's, the US EPA Energy Star program's intent to build a rating system, certification system for tenants. And that was just released out of its charter program. Previously, it was in a pilot called Charter Tenants, and now it's actually been released. So I think that's going to be fantastic for the industry, as it's really been a it's been important to incorporate tenants into your energy efficient efforts, and having this certification will really go a long way. So that's a great one that's come out of RER's efforts, out of US EPA Energy Star's efforts, and just shows that we can still focus on non-COVID related G items, even in this environment.
Well, that's a great shout out. And Eric, I don't want to leave off of that support for RER. The observation I have that Dana's boss was the chair of the council when that conversation started. So Tony Malkin might be accurately described as having spearheaded that effort, but it's an observation that he made.
The father of Energy Star for tenant spaces.
The father of Energy Star for tenant space. On top of which, that was it tonight or last night, Dana, that the Empire State Building was lit up light blue in honor of the 39,000 buildings across the country that have earned Energy Star. Was that last night? Tonight.
Yes, it was last night, and that was really a fun thing to be able to do. That, you know, I think we need to get more positive messaging out these days, and celebrating what we continue to work on as an industry. And I'm glad Eric brought up Energy Star. We don't stop trending in these times. We're still, as Eric said, Energy Star Tenant Spaces is formally launched now as a program, not in pilot. Energy Star certifications continue with adjustments ongoing. And it's really important to use this opportunity, lemonade out of lemons, to study, why our energy usage isn't down proportionately with occupancy, and really dig into those loads. I mean, Eric and I talk about this a lot. So, the idea of the impaired loads and how much of our tenant shit stays on when they're not there is terrible. It's not just during a pandemic that this is a problem. It's a problem every night. It's a problem every weekend. It's a problem every holiday that, so much equipment remains on. Temperature set points are too cool in the summer and too warm in the winter, and those are literally free ways to save serious energy. So we have seen renewed interest, if anything, in sustainability and ESG from our investors, for sure.
That's fantastic. I think we have to wrap up. But
job security, Stuart.
Job security. I'm glad you have job security. I'm glad we need to wrap up, and that's a positive note, and it's a wonderful example of the industry coming together, working with government, working with industry associations, and sharing information, which I know is very important to both of your firms. So I encourage everyone to look forward to all of our listeners to look forward to our conversation in just another month, where we'll be talking and digging in a little bit deeper into the details of the wellness programs and their contents with speakers who have studied the topics. And I want to thank Dana, Lisa, and Eric so much for joining us again today and adding on to the conversation that we started 3 months ago. I think to listen to the combination of sessions reveals a tremendous amount of heartfelt effort, great progress, and ambition for moving forward in ways that only continue to build on your successes. So with that,